Hey everyone, we played our first 40k game. Well, you played your first 8th edition game, didn't you?
Yeah.
And it's my second.
Probably not far off my first 40k game in general.
You played Fantasy and then Age of Sigmar and not much else. So we've kind of gone through the differences because I was trying to explain to Rachel, while understanding myself, the differences between Age of Sigmar and Warhammer 40,000. And I started writing it down and I thought, you know what? This would be worth having as a document for us to cross-reference as a reminder, and also to put it out to all of you on YouTube, because it's reference. It might help you, it might not. There will be stuff on here that I've missed, but I've tried to cover as much as possible, so forgive me if there's stuff that's not on there. So we're just going to go through some of the main differences between the two games, and if you're an Age of Sigmar player and you're thinking about playing Warhammer 40k, this is a bit of a...
It was useful for me, because that's where I was coming from. I've played lots of Sigmar, never really played 40k, read the rules and thought, oh, there's a lot of similarities here. And then Sam started pointing out some of the key differences, and actually that was quite useful.
So if it helps, then that's awesome. Let us know in the comments down below. If there's stuff we've missed out, put it in the comments below, because that's useful for anybody else watching this. If you like the video, please give us a thumbs up as well and share it, because I know there'll be a lot of groups on Facebook and around YouTube where they're not sure whether to play 40k or Age of Sigmar or both. So if you've got people who are maybe on the fence of either of them, share this and it might, you know, help get more people into the game. I don't know, it might do, it might not. So we'll start with we've got Age of Sigmar, rules that only affect Age of Sigmar. We've got rules that only affect Warhammer 40,000, and then we've got rules that are shared between the three of them, between the two games. So if we go through, in terms of data sheets, the actual data slates or the stats or whatever it is that each of the cards have got, they're laid out very differently. So Age of Sigmar's got your circle with your save, your movement, your bravery, and something else. It's got 4 stats on there. And then you've got your normal weapon profiles as well. Movement.
I thought you said movement.
Maybe. Anyway, there's 4 things on there. The differences between the profiles is in Age of Sigmar, you've got a flat to wound characteristic on the profile. So you might need a 3 to hit and then a 3 to wound, and that will be referenced as the weapon. So each weapon in Age of Sigmar will be listed in the profile, and it will tell you the to hit and the to wound roll, whereas in Warhammer 40,000 you have a strength versus toughness chart instead. If your strength is twice or more than the toughness, you need a 2 or more to hit. If it's greater than the toughness, you need a 3 or more. If it's equal, it's a 4 or more. Lower, it's a 5, and then half, it's a 6. So that's one of the main differences straight away. It's just the wounding roll. Then you've got the monster and the vehicle charts. So in Age of Sigmar, you've got your Carnosaur, your big monsters, and some characters have got this as well. And basically they get weaker based on how many wounds they suffer. So that's the way that Sigmar does it. Whereas in Warhammer 40,000, they get weaker based on their remaining wounds. The characteristics that are shared are the movement value, the hit, which is weapon skill or ballistic skill in Warhammer 40k, so that's a flat to hit number that you have to roll. And in 40k, weapon skill is based on when you're in combat what you need to hit, and what's ballistic skill for?
Shoot him. Shoot
him, so what you need to hit for shoot him. Wounds are the same as well. Leadership or bravery, so in Warhammer 40k it's leadership, in Age of Sigmar it's bravery. And then you've got your save, which is, again, shared across both of them. The differences between those, in Warhammer 40,000 you have invulnerable saves, which is something you can take instead of a normal save. So in Age of Sigmar you have a rend value, which can reduce your save by a certain amount. And in Warhammer 40,000 you have an armor penetration value, which again reduces your save by a certain amount. And in Warhammer 40,000 you can use an invulnerable save instead of a normal save, and that won't get reduced by any armor penetration value regardless. So that's the difference on that. In Age of Sigmar, all of your attacks for their melee and their ranged weapons are on their profile, and they can use all of the ones that they're equipped with. So
unless it does say or.
Well, it will say for yours you can choose spears or swords, but on the profile it'll have the sword and the spear, and you will choose when you're making the list which one it has. But if you've got, like with your Saurus warriors, they've got their jaws, they've got a sword, say, as well, they will be able to attack with both of those, and those weapon profiles will be on there.
Yep.
Whereas in Warhammer 40k, your attacks are in your characteristic. So a captain might have 2 attacks, and he might have a sword and a claw, but you have to choose which weapon you're going to attack with. You don't get to do both of them. So that's the difference between 40k and Age of Sigmar with your attacks. However, in the shooting phase for Warhammer 40k, you can shoot all of your weapons with the certain limitation. You can't shoot more than 1 grenade per unit, and you can't shoot pistols as well as another weapon type.
Yep.
But if you've got an assault weapon as well as like a rapid fire bolter, you can fire both of those with your unit. In Age of Sigmar, you can, like I say, you can shoot all of the ones that is equipped with, including mounts.
I think the other similarity between monsters and things in Sigmar and 40k is the fact that now vehicles and monsters and all that lot do get weaker as they could take wounds.
Yeah.
Like my Dread Knight, for example.
Yeah, whereas before it was the armour penetration value, the armour value. You can kill it in one shot, whereas now you probably have to focus the vehicles and the monsters down.
Yep.
Changes the game massively, and that was taken from Age of Sigmar. They obviously liked how it worked and went with it. Another one, before we go on to the actual turn sequence and the phases in general, you've got terrain, so scenery pieces that you're using. There are different types in Sigmar and 40k that can do different effects, but the bog standard, if all of your models are in cover, you get +1 to your save, and that's added onto your normal save. In Warhammer 40,000, you get no benefit for that cover in the fight phase. So when you're in combat, you don't get any bonuses to the save of the cover that you're in. It also has no effect on invulnerable saves. So if you wanted to take your invulnerable save rather than your normal one, you don't get to add your cover save to that. The difference in Sigmar is you still get the cover save if you're in combat, but only if you didn't charge. So if you charged into somebody and they were in cover and you're now in cover, they will get the save bonus, but you don't. But again, you have to have the whole unit in that cover, otherwise it doesn't work. Turn sequence, so that's another thing that's different. So in Age of Sigmar, how does it work in Age of Sigmar?
Well, you just roll off, don't you?
Roll off, you just roll off, yeah.
But like you can, so you could have like 2 turns together. Like you could, at the end of turn 1, like I could have just had my turn.
Yeah.
And we roll off, and then I could have another turn straight afterwards.
Yeah, so at the start of each battle round, so start of turn 1, you and me will roll. And then at the start of round 2, the start of the whole of the battle round 2, we then roll again for priority. And like
See, I don't like that. I do prefer 40k in that sense.
What, you go, I go?
Turns, yeah.
It's more reactive.
Yeah, but it just puts too much chance.
It does, but you have to react, and it's both ways as well. And you have to make more decisions on the chance of maybe not going afterwards. And you don't do the whole, you know, I'm going to put my model this far forwards because I know that it's my turn in 2 turns, and you're not doing that range game. You like the range game. In 40,000, it's alternating throughout. So you have first turn, I'll have second turn, and then you go and then I go, and that's how Warhammer 40k goes. So that's all of those bits I want to go through before we go on to the actual phases. Okay? Now, the phases are they're very similar. The only difference is between the psychic powers and the hero phase. So in Age of Sigmar, you have your hero phase first, and that's the phase where you can do all of your hero abilities and your command abilities, and that's before you do your movement. In 40k, you do your movement first, and then you go on to your psychic phase. So your psychic phase in Age of Sigmar is obviously your hero phase, which is first, and that's where you cast all your powers. I'll tell you what, let's just do it. So Age of Sigmar, you've got hero, then movement, then shooting, then the charge, then combat, then battle shock. 40k, movement, then psychic, then shooting, charge, fight, and morale. So the last 4 phases for each of those turns are exactly the same, they're just worded as different things. So it's battle shock in Age of Sigmar, it's morale in Warhammer 40k. Otherwise it's the same thing, and we'll go into the rules of what the differences are in a moment. But it does change it, because obviously in Sigmar you do your spells before you do any movement. In 40k you do your movement and then you can cast powers. So it does.
I quite like that though, because then you can decide where you need to be to go and do your magic.
It opens it up a lot more, doesn't it? So on to the hero and psychic phase. We'll do that first, following Age of Sigmar, because that's the first phase for them. Wizards can only cast, or psychers in the case of 40k, can only attempt to cast 1 spell per turn. Each spell once per turn. which is what you found out recently in your game of 8th edition.
Yeah.
If you have 5 units, all with the same spell, only one of them can cast it per turn. And that might just be match play rules, but that's what we play in both games. So that definitely means you have to choose which unit's going to cast the spell and which one isn't. There is an exception to that. In 40k you can use Smite as many times as you want. That's something that can be repeated.
You don't really come across it so much in Sigmar though, because most people don't have the same spells, do they? They don't tend to share spells.
No, but they do have Arcane Bolt and Mystic Shield, and they may make it so you can cast them as many times as you want.
You can.
Oh, you can already? Okay.
Well, you can't, like with the same wizard, but I think each wizard
units
can cast it multiple times.
Not sure on that one, 100%. In 40k you have Perils of the Warp, so if you roll a double 1 or a double 6 when you're rolling to cast your spell, then you perils, and then you go through the whole process of periling. And we've done videos on that and the actual in-depth turn processes. We're just going through the differences between the games in this video. Both of the games use the same way to cast a spell or a power now, which is rolling 2d6, and you either cast it or you don't cast it.
Yep.
However, you can dispel it in Age of Sigmar, or you can deny the witch in Warhammer 40k, and they are a little bit different. So in Age of Sigmar, you have to be within 18 inches of the wizard that cast the spell, and you have to have line of sight to actually dispel it. Whereas in Warhammer 40k, you just have to be within 24 inches of the psyker that cast his psychic power. So you can actually just chuck them in a building and stop people casting things.
Mm-hmm.
So that's quite a big difference, really, without it being quite blatantly obvious. So that's the hero and the psychic phase. Then we go into the movement phase. Now, pretty basic, you can't move more than the characteristic that your unit has, and that's on the profile. In Age of Sigmar, you can't move within 3 inches of an enemy model at any point, unless you're in the charging phase and you're in combat. But movement, you can't move within 3 inches of an enemy model. In 40k, you can't move within 1 inch of an enemy model. So quite big on the ranges of that, and I don't know whether it's to encourage more movement in 40k into getting into combat or not. It must be, because they were dominated, the shooting phase dominated a lot more in the past, so that's the only reason I can think that. Units within combat range, so again 3 inches, if you're within 3 inches on Age of Sigmar, if you're within 1 inch on 40k, at the start of the movement phase you can only choose to fall back or retreat, or you remain stationary. So you're used to that anyway, aren't you? You can't just walk away and do anything you want. So if you choose to retreat or fall back, you then can't advance or run, and you can't shoot or charge. The difference in 40k is if you have the fly keyword, you can still shoot even if you retreat. So you can get into combat with somebody and stop them from doing something in their turn, and then jump out in your turn and still blast it to pieces, which is worth knowing. Then you've got the advance or run special rule, and they're the same in both games. So in the movement phase, if you choose to advance or run, you roll a d6 and you add that to the movement value that your character or infantry unit has. But if you do that, you can't shoot or charge afterwards. Again, it's pretty straightforward with that.
Same.
The fly special rule, in both games, it allows you to move over models and terrain as if they weren't there, but you still have to remain out of the combat range, which is 3 or 1, depending on the game you're on. And in 40k, having the fly special word means you've got a minimum movement and a maximum. So if you don't move the minimum, you're removed from the table.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty harsh when I read it.
It makes sense. If you've got a jet blasting onto the table, I'm not moving there, there's something in the way. You got to take it off.
No, I like the realism of it. Like you say, it does stop certain things from being able just to stop mid-flying, which would just be so unrealistic. But I imagine there will be some with a special rule where the minimum's 0. If it's something that can hover, you'd expect it to have a minimum of 0.
They can easily do it if there isn't any at the moment. I haven't properly looked, but it's a good call. Shooting phase next then. So the thing that's the same in both of them, you pick a unit that didn't advance or fall back, and you shoot all ranged weapons at the targets within the range of those weapons. So this is where Warhammer 40k, like I said, if you've got a rapid fire weapon and an assault weapon, you can fire both of them. If you're in Age of Sigmar and you've got 10 ranged weapon profiles, you can shoot all of them, as long as they're all within range. The other thing is you can split attacks between whatever you're shooting at anything in line of sight. So I can shoot my bolt gun at a Chaos dude over there, and I can shoot my assault weapon over that side at.
See, my problem now is, now I've played both versions, I'm going to get confused with which you can do when.
You can do both, that's what I'm saying, they're the same for both. You can split your attacks, which are regardless of the game you're in.
Oh, yeah.
The difference is the shooting in the combat phase, which we'll go on to. So with Age of Sigmar, you can shoot into combat and while you're in combat, which is massively different. The only difference with 40k is you cannot shoot into a combat or while you're in combat unless you have a pistol. And if you have a pistol, you have to shoot at the closest enemy unit. So if you're in combat with a unit, you can only shoot your pistols at them.
Which kind of makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense.
I mean, if someone's like running at you with a sword, you're not just going to shoot Bob down the road, are you? Really?
No. If you've watched Indiana Jones, you can definitely take some advice from that. The other thing with the shooting phase in Age of Sigmar, you can target whatever unit you want. So you can shoot characters even if they're next to the units. In 40k, you can't target any characters that have less than 10 wounds unless they're the closest unit. So you've got to be careful. You've got to do your manoeuvring and your positioning correctly so that you can pick out characters.
Yeah. Or alternatively, you've got to position yourself correctly so you don't get picked out.
Yes, exactly. So keep your heroes behind units. And my first game is definitely an example of how not to position your characters. So if you've not seen the Grey Knight versus Eldar game that me and Mike played, you only have to watch the first turn that I did and you can see my bad positioning. It doesn't work out. So that's it. So pick all the, and then you go on to picking your weapons, picking the targets for the weapons. And the difference for this is there's a bunch of weapon types in Warhammer 40k. So you've got assault weapons, which allow you to fire even if you've advanced, but you have to subtract 1 from the hit roll. You've got heavy weapons, which you shoot as normal, but you subtract 1 from your hit roll because they're heavy. Rapid fire weapons, which allow you to do double the amount of attacks if you're within half the range. So if you've got a 24-inch range bolt gun, you have to be less than 12 inches to do your double shots. And then you've got grenades. One of the models in the unit, instead of firing its normal weapon, can throw a grenade instead. And then you've got the pistols, which we've already said can fire within 1 inch of an enemy. When you're within 1 inch of an enemy, has to target the closest enemy unit. And the other restriction is you can't fire a pistol as well as any other type of weapon. But that's it, that's shooting done as well. So not major differences, but definitely some stuff to point out.
Subtle changes, yeah.
Charging phase. So both games, you cannot choose units that fell back or advanced in the previous turn, or units that are within the combat range already. So if you're already in combat, you can't charge something else. Both games, you roll 2d6 and then you move up to the distance allowed. In Age of Sigmar, the first model has to end their charge within half an inch of the enemy. In Warhammer 40k, you have to move within, the first model has to be within 1 inch of the enemy unit. So again, it's little differences. It's half an inch for Sigmar and it's an inch for 40k. In 40k, obviously, you have Overwatch as well. So you have to choose who you're charging. You have to say, I'm charging 3 units, and then all 3 of those units get to Overwatch if they're not already locked in combat. And then you do your charging. In Age of Sigmar, you don't need to pick a unit. So long as something is within 12 inches of an enemy, you roll your 2 dice and then you move them after you've rolled it. So you've got a bit more flexibility with Age of Sigmar.
That as well.
This is why this document helps, if just as a reminder for little rules every now and again.
I'll have to have a look before I play a game.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to check it.
Which one's Sigmar and which one's 40k?
Because there are subtle differences, but they are quite key.
It makes a difference, doesn't it, in the game?
No. What else have we got for charging? Cannot move any models within 1 inch of an enemy not chosen as a target unit. So that's quite a big one as well that you don't realise at first. But if you've got like a hero here and another hero and a unit, and you want to only charge those 2 units and not the last hero, you have to select both of those 2. And then if you get any of your models within range of the hero you didn't select, you can't make the charge. So you have to make sure that you can make the charge on the stuff you want to get into combat with.
Yep.
And if you don't, then you fail on that as well. So that's the charging phase. Then we've got combat and fight. Combat or fight, depending on which game you're playing.
Yep.
So both games, you choose the unit which is within the combat range. So 3 for Sigmar, 1 for 40k. So in Age of Sigmar, whoever's turn it is gets to activate one of their units first, and then the opponent gets to choose, and then it's back to the other person again, and you go back and forth.
In 40k, the priority goes to the units that have charged, so you do all of those first, and then you switch to alternating between the players, starting with whoever's turn it is. Whereas in Sigmar, it doesn't matter who's charged. You could charge 3 units in, but you still only get to do 1 attack first, and then it goes back to the other player.
Yeah, and then I mean that's the other thing with Sigmar. If you're looking at charging, you want to really do an odd number of charges, so that you have the advantage. Because if you charge one unit into a unit and it's your turn, you get to activate that unit first. If you charge 2 units, you activate 1 and get the advantage, but then they get to activate and get the advantage on the other one.
Yeah.
Whereas if you charge 3 units in, you've got the advantage on 2 of those and you lose out on 1. So with Sigmar, try and charge the odd amount of units.
Yeah.
I guess tactic. Whether it works or not is different. The other thing is obviously with 40k you've got command points which can you can interrupt the activation sequence. So whoever's charged everything in, they all go first anyway. But as soon as one of them has attacked and done their attack, you can use 2 command points to then activate one of your own units to then interrupt the process and attack before the rest. So that's one way you can interrupt priority on 40k.
It's a bit like Croak's little gift that he has, isn't it? Having those extra dice that you can just use throughout.
Yeah, Destiny dice or whatever they're called. I don't know why I had Mad Max's witness me on that then. Witness me! He just croak in the middle. Witness me!
It's like that though, isn't it?
What else have we got? So once you've chosen the unit you want to fight with, you then move them each model up to 2 inches, and they have to go towards the closest enemy model. So if you're already in base contact, you can't then shuffle around it. You're already as close as you can be. Whereas if you've charged in and left like 2 millimeters or 5, half an inch or whatever, you can then pile in around something. And the main rule is you have to get closer to that enemy model than you were before you piled in. That's the only difference. So you can shuffle around. So
again, tactically, you're best when you charge, not actually go using the full charge and not don't go into base contact straight away.
Which is difficult with big units because you want to try and get as many in as possible. But if you can help it, try not to get in base contact, because Sigmar you only have to be within half an inch. 40k you only have to be within an inch after the charge, and that's only the first model. The rest of your unit could be 5 inches away. So long as they keep their unit coherency, you're absolutely fine. The other thing is that's the same. If you're splitting attacks with your weapons, you have to choose where you're going to split them and then roll them all afterwards. So you can't choose a weapon, roll an attack, and then choose another weapon once that model's died and attack something else. If you've got 10 attacks and you want to split them, you have to choose where you're going to do that first. And that's the same in both games. The actual attacking is different. So in Age of Sigmar, you have a weapon range with all of your melee weapons. So some might be 1 inch, some might be 2 or 3. And it's quite simple. Whoever's within that range, you can then inflict the attacks, you can split the attacks onto. In 40k, you have to be within half an inch of an enemy or within 1 inches of an engaged unit member.
Yep.
And then that way you can do your attacks onto whatever is within that range. Then the number of attacks is different again, like we've already said. So in Age of Sigmar, you attack with all of the weapons that you have got equipped, and they're all on your profile. In 40k, you have to choose the melee weapon you want to use, and then your model will have the attack characteristic. So a Primaris Intercessor has 2 attacks. He hasn't actually got any choice of weapons, but let's pretend he's got a power sword and a lightning claw. Those 2 attacks, he chooses whether he wants to roll them on one or the other, or if he wants to do one on both. And you choose that, and then you roll it afterwards.
Whereas I suppose with Sigmar, you decide before you go into battle, really, don't you, what you've got?
Yeah, I mean, it'll be on your army list. It'll be written down what stuff you've got. But again, you might have a big, like Carnosaur, who might have 8 different weapon profiles, and he's got all of those attacks.
Yeah, you just work your way down.
And you just go, right, I'm dividing this weapon, and this weapon onto that unit, and then this weapon, which is in range, can attack this unit, and then you roll it all. The other difference with combat in 40k is at the end of all of your attacks with that unit, consolidate up to 3 inches towards the closest enemy model. So as long as you end your consolidation closer to that enemy model, you can do what you want with that.
Yep.
The final difference between the two is in the battle shock or the morale phase. In both games, it's exactly the same. You start with the player whose turn it is, you roll 1 dice, and you add the number of slain models, and you compare that with the leadership or the bravery that the model's got, and then you lose 1 model for each
sort of point that you're over.
Each difference that you go over on that stat. The only thing that's different is in Age of Sigmar you get +1 bravery for every 10 models that you have in that unit. I'll try and make this look a little bit easier on the eye, and I'll put it on the website. So if you want to see what this is and maybe print it out for yourself and have it as a reference copy, then feel free to do that. I'll put this video up first, and then I'll put a post on the website I'll put it on the Facebook page. So
Facebook page.
I'll put a post. So as soon as this is available for you to download, I'll let you know. But it's a decent reference tool. Hopefully it's going to help people out between the 2 games, or maybe getting them into it. And yeah, hopefully it was worth the time. It's definitely probably worth it for you and me alone, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just so that we know the rules a little bit better.
Well, with how many games we're going to be playing interchangeably, it's just useful to be able to quickly skim through and go, oh yeah, that's Sigmar, that's 40k.
Yeah, definitely. So thank you for watching. If you like the video, give us a like. Like I said before, share it to anybody who you think would be interested in it. And thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.